Welcome to the chaos sector. We return to the matrix. Let's put things into perspective here. Vice President Kamala Harris is currently negotiating with Donald Trump to hold a presidential debate. This entire election cycle has been a joke, a farce. It wasn't traditional. And we can even make the case that it was an illusion. After all, it is the political matrix. The CPD, or Commission of Presidential Debates, was disregarded by Old Joe's team to negotiate directly with Trump and his campaign. This should have been a red flag for Trump to reject those negotiations and follow tradition and the traditional scheduled dates of the debates. But of course, Trump is a loose cannon, so he agreed, thinking it would be better to quickly lace his boots up and expose Old Joe. Trump, of course, has been eager to return back to the White House, feeling a sense of vindication. Yet his haste and, dare I say, arrogance might backfire. When dealing with Democrats and their clever, underhanded tactics, you have to be more cerebral in how you counter. Here's an analogy brought to you by the animal kingdom. A male lion is powerful, courageous, shows strength and ferocity, but surrounded by a pack of hyenas, it can become fatal for that male lion. See, the male lion might be physically stronger than a hyena, and they obviously fear the male lion, but the hyena's bite force is almost twice the force of a lion. Now put this into perspective of that male lion being surrounded by about 20 to 40 hyenas. The male lion will obviously put up a fight, but if it's not careful, it might not make it out alive. Sure, it will battle to the end and take out a few hyenas as well, but the mission would be accomplished by the hyenas. And that mission would be greatly triumphant, as they took down their adversary, especially the strong male adversary they inherently fear. In other words, Trump is the male lion, bold, courageous, showing no fear. Hyenas are Democrats surrounding him, plotting, scheming, distracting, frustrating, as we always point out. Yeah, they're the wackos in the political matrix. But there is a think tank that knows how to strategically accomplish their goals. Trump and Old Joe hold their first debate. The consensus was Trump won, and it appeared that Old Joe's time was up. And that's exactly what happened, as he decided to not run for president. Many saw this as a decision based on his performance, but it was all a part of the plan in our opinions. Think about it. If many believed that Old Joe wasn't running the show, especially conservatives and Republicans, do you honestly think Democrats believed he could beat Trump? Excluding the Clover virus and the global pandemic, mysterious support from black voters, and some vigorous scanning of ballots, Old Joe had no chance against Trump in the 2020 presidential elections. So, of course, without the Clover virus and global pandemic as a distraction in 2024, Old Joe was dead in the water. Ironic, because that's exactly what co-founder of Black Votes Matter, Latasha Brown, stated about Old Joe in the 2020 presidential cycle. For some odd reason, we can't seem to find that video where she made that statement. But what we did find was an article from August of 2021, when Joe Biden had taken the office as the result of support from black voters. Quote, amid a fierce fight over voting rights, black leaders are watching to see how President Biden wields the power they say black voters gave him. Some worry that a familiar pattern may be playing out again. Okay, wait, I have to stop right here. A pattern is a repeated process or action. It's defined by similar or exact repetitions of an action or process. So if those black leaders and voters worried that a pattern may be playing out again with Democrats, doesn't this mean it previously happened? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me more than twice. Well, that becomes a very intriguing interaction now, doesn't it? Let me continue, though. Quote, there's always this air that in some way that black Americans are supposed to wait, said Latasha Brown, a co-founder of Black Voters Matter. Oftentimes when we're engaged in this process, it's a sense of urgency of what we need when there's an election. But then once there's a result, it seems that our issues are always put to the back burner, unquote. So Latasha Brown, who stated Old Joe was dead in the water without the black vote, demanded that he pick a black woman as his vice president. Almost a year later from that inauguration, now she's complaining. What did you expect from corrupt politicians? See, the problem this creates specifically for the black community is it depicts black Democratic voters as incompetent. And we know that's not the case, but in the political matrix, that's exactly how they will be depicted. Let's read a bit more in that article. Quote, black voters overwhelmingly and reliably support Democratic candidates. But year after year, black leaders say that Democratic politicians court their vote, promise systemic change, and then fail to follow through. As a candidate, Biden named systemic racism as one of the major crises facing the nation. Biden told black voters things would be different. Quote, you've always had my back and I'll have yours, Biden promised. With that vow in mind, leaders of the voting rights movement have been pushing the White House to fight more forcefully to protect voting rights in particular. Republicans have passed a wave of laws at the state level that are putting new restrictions on voting that activists fear will disproportionately affect black people and Latinos. Unquote. Now, first of all, the main issue they are referring to is voter ID. And it should be a non-issue, but let's take a look at another article. Get a load of this. Quote, over 272,000 registered voters don't have a driver's license or state ID on file with election officials, meaning they'd have to submit additional documents to vote by mail under Georgia's new voting law. State election records show the ID requirements disproportionately affect black voters, who are much less likely than white voters to have ID numbers matched to their voter registrations, according to election data. Unquote. If you don't have a driver's license or state ID, then submitting additional documentation to vote should not be a problem, right? I mean, since you don't have the primary sources, you provide the secondary sources, right? But if you don't even have the secondary sources, then to be honest, you should not be able to cast a vote. And see, here's the problem with that scenario. What black person in the state of Georgia doesn't have their driver's license or state ID? You have one of those once you become of legal age to vote. If you lost your ID, then provide the required documentation as a substitute. Yet, if you don't have anything, and these voting right activists are advocating for you to have the right to vote, then that is advocating for committing a crime. Mind you, we take this same scenario in other areas of life and social setting. If you want to cash a check, purchase alcohol, purchase tobacco, heck, even drive a vehicle, rent an apartment, apply for government assistance, apply for employment. I mean, the list goes on and on. If there is no identity provided, that individual is more likely to be a criminal in society. In that setting, poll workers and election officials would allow people to cast votes without a driver's license, without a state ID, and without any substitute to those forms of identification. So how could you identify the person without, well, their identity? Oh, you know, they're American citizens. They don't need identification to vote. This is illegal, or better yet, criminal activity. And it also magnifies the contrast between those blacks and Latinos who do have identification casting votes legally, alongside individuals who are literally invisible. And mentioning Latino voters, now I'm going to go out on a limb that those Latino voters they're referring to are actually, that's right, illegal immigrants. It doesn't matter if those illegal immigrants are good people, family-oriented, good neighbors by law. They are illegally residing in the country. Don't forget, Old Joe included illegal immigrants on the United States Census. This was one of the executive orders in his first 100 days in office, which, by the way, severely lacked any focus or concern for the black community that literally got him into office. So what do we have here? Individuals who don't have driver's licenses nor state IDs, nor any other form of documentation to prove their identity, and illegal immigrants, which Democrats are claiming is an example of voter discrimination.
And Kamala Harris pushed that rhetoric as well, along with Democratic politicians in the state of Georgia. But let me reiterate the point about those black voters being so-called disappointed with Old Joe's performance. You see the statue? This is, of course, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Old Slickback and others are standing in front of it, symbolizing the dream of a historical figure, right? Yet, this symbol of hope is being attached to a career politician, a white one at that, who was clearly not invested in the black community from day one. And even before day one, his policies proved he had nothing to offer the black community. So is this a symbol of hope that Old Joe can make a change? Or is this a symbol of, well, just anybody but a Republican? And even more devastating that this image of unity and hope, well, these individuals chose to support a white man over a woman of color as president. So in essence, that is a statue of a white man being depicted as having the same impact and change as a black civil rights leader. All praise to old Joe. He will fight for the black community by signing tons of executive orders for illegal immigrants, which had real impacts in the country, while virtue signaling to the black community, putting them on the back burner, as LaTosha Brown stated. Some may say, oh, you know, delegates dumped so much money behind old Joe's campaign, so black voters settled for old Joe. But then this contradicts the narrative from old Slickback and Black Votes Matter, who say their vote demands respect, and they single-handedly determine if a Democrat is elected president. So boasting about this political power, and yet folding when it's time to display that political power. Well, what does that mean? It means you will vote for a white man who has insulted you on national television and somehow just sweeps it under the rug to show your allegiance to the Democratic Party. Simply put, black people do have political power, but are compromised to use it. And they have one specific person to blame for that. That's right, the black woman. Old Joe needed black women to win the presidential election against Trump. Black women had their demands. We vote for you if you pick a black woman as vice president. Honestly, this was all a smokescreen, in which they would vote Democrat anyway. And since old Joe was the nominee for Democrats, they would vote for him regardless. But to make it appear that the vote was based on, get this, integrity of the vote, they presented an illusion of an ultimatum for his campaign. In other words, if old Joe rejected their demands of choosing a black woman as vice president, they wanted everyone to believe they would sit out that election year. Now, these are black women who make up 90% of the black vote for Democrat. All of a sudden, they've grown a backbone to hold Democrats accountable. Not buying it. Although we couldn't find the video of LaTosha Brown making the statement about old Joe being dead in the water without the black vote, we found another one, which pretty much says the same thing. Let's take a listen.
Vice President Biden,
You need us. You owe us.
Black women are miracle workers.
We have been saving the Democratic Party since 1965.
2020 is no different.
Your only path to victory is through black women.
The voters who need to turn out, we know how to mobilize them. Our votes must not be taken for granted.
The following commitments will begin to show black voters that you are serious about us.
America needs a black woman vice president.
Candidates like Amy Klobuchar will not energize us. America needs
A black woman Supreme Court justice.
Remember Anita Hill? We do.
America needs more in a comprehensive black agenda.
The rules are rigged against our communities.
Whether we are talking about a black person who died of Ep.18 because of the lack of access to health care,
Or Ahmaud Arbery being killed by vigilantes.
or Breonna Taylor, an EMT killed by police while laying in her bed. We deserve solutions that address systemic racism, economic injustice, and domestic terrorism.
Joe Biden, you enacted drug and crime laws that harmed the black community for generations.
Every major crime bill since 1976, every minor crime bill, has had the name of the Democratic senator from the state of Delaware, Joe Biden, on that bill.
You say you know better now. Show us you're serious by doing better.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
This country has a problem. Police officers and vigilantes are killing us, and our quality of life must improve.
Joe Biden, this must be addressed.
You must address our oppression, and most importantly, embrace our power to win the White House.
Vice President Biden, your campaign's mission is to restore the soul of America.
There is no restoration without us.
In addition to that, did you notice the message was all about black women? I guess old Joe didn't need black men. Where are the black men in this message? And don't be fooled by the coded language of saying the black vote, because everyone knows that is predominantly, and I mean 90% predominantly, black women. So when LaTosha Brown and others say the black vote got old Joe elected president, they really mean the black woman's vote got old Joe elected. And this is a false representation of the black community, because it's not truly breaking down that support from a policy perspective. Think about this. In 2016, Hillary Clinton received a whopping 94% of black women for her as president. Just off of chance, this is impossible. meaning policies can't be the determining factor for such a high percentage. Well, Hillary Clinton wouldn't have even been the Democratic candidate to begin with. These are statistical misrepresentations, or even fabrications, of the support for a Democratic candidate. And Black women have consistently contributed to these misrepresentations. And it makes things even worse when time and time again you do the heavy lifting for another white person in a country you deem to be rooted in white supremacy. The optics of this photo says a lot. A Black woman gives another white person power when that Black woman doesn't truly grasp that she, along with others, have the real power. They get that power, you expect something in return, and like the con artist she is, leaves you in the cold with no sweater. If that's not hurtful enough, what about when this white person culturally appropriates to pander to your community just for votes? And those Southern accents she made fun of? Well, she's a Democrat, there's nothing to see here. What about the carrying hot sauce in her purse? Oh, there's nothing culturally offensive there. The same with old Joe's statements about Black voters in the last election cycle.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't Black.
It was Black women who gave him a pass, including Latasha Brown, who stated it was, quote, reckless and cavalier. But it wasn't racist, not prejudice. They didn't even admit that it was offensive. And that kind of tells you what game is being played here. You see, in cities such as Atlanta, which has a large Black population, there are tons of fraternities and sororities. There is an organization called Stroll to the Polls. Yeah, see, this is the problem. Successful Black women, who are sorority members, go out every election year and vote exclusively Democrat, no matter what. And it's a bit narcissistic as well, as it's more of a display of fashion and their individual success being the focus, rather than any real concern about politics. These successful Black women, who are professors, psychologists, lawyers, CEOs, donate large amounts of money to political campaigns. But the communities, specifically in inner cities of Atlanta, have become some of the most dangerous communities in the city. These Black women and other Black women who have such political influence make sure they stay away from any form of community engagement. Not to get spicy, but it's speculated that these high-profile, successful Black women only come around the inner cities to, quote, have a good time. Then after they've had their fun, they drive off in their Mercedes-Benz, leaving without a trace. They may have been raised in those environments, but quickly disassociate themselves from it. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with moving on from where you once were. But it's more about their perception of others, an elitist, smug attitude towards those less fortunate than them. They are called bougie Black women in the culture. Now you may think this is an attack on them, but to the contrary. This is also how they vote. They vote from this smug perspective. Meaning, all of the rhetoric about improving the conditions of the Black community, especially the inner cities, well, the Stroll of the Polls Brigade does not vote for that interest. They vote for their political power, nothing more.
Embrace our power to win the White House.
And there is a divide between Black men and Black women due to this hunger for power. Black men are not fighting to accomplish such feats politically. They're too busy working hard, pursuing their goals, providing for their families, just like everyone else. But Black women have become thirsty for power, and it's starting to show itself in the political matrix by virtue of their allegiance to the Democratic Party. Most of these Stroll to the Polls women are single, do not have children, no families, and yet they impact the communities greatly, based on their impact politically. And as we all know, Black men and Black women have become detached altogether. So that's another factor. If there were more Black men involved, you would not have such an overwhelming impact from Black women politically. And it would also help diversify that 90% clip of Black votes for Democrats. Black men have essentially been pushed aside, and this also strips them of their natural protective role in the community. They can't truly be protectors and leaders in the community. If Black women hold all of the political power, yes, that's how much politics dominates society. Now, bringing this all the way back to Kamala Harris, I think everyone should see the point. She's the same, no concern about the Black community, only cares about her political power, and doesn't have support from black men. Harris is the epitome of stroll to the polls. It's not a march to the polls. Marching indicates intent, purpose, compassion. Strolling, well, we've heard of the saying, I'm going to take a stroll through the park. It's lackluster, aloof, whimsical, comfortable, no urgency. So, these black women are going to take a stroll down to the polling stations to vote, which is one of the most important decisions a citizen makes for the country. Yet it's treated like a stroll in the park, basically. The same characteristics of the vice president. She's whimsical, no urgency, aloof, just floating in her own world. And black women who will vote for her are not truly voting for Kamala Harris, the politician. They are voting for a symbol of power. Never mind her policies. They could care less about her and whatever she proposes. It's about political power being the reason behind it all. Ironic, though, because they have that in common with her. Yet both sides don't truly care about one another. These type of women are what we refer to as toxic femininity, women empowerment, black women empowerment, and the symbol of black women being the leaders of an entire nation. Yes, specifically black women. Nothing wrong with natural progression and history, but if you're manufacturing progression and history, well, that becomes a case of manufactured diversity, manufactured equity, and manufactured inclusion.
Well said. Democrats are relying on their most loyal voting base, yet it's starting to seep out that it's not about Harris becoming the first black woman to be president. It's reduced to just being another Democrat being supported by the black community, or should I say, black women. It says a lot. We've pointed this out, and I guess it should be emphasized even more here. If Kamala Harris was a Republican and Trump was a Democrat, would black women be concerned about voting for the first black woman for president? Of course not. She would be a sellout by their standards. So what merit does all of these historical accomplishments have if it's only celebrated if that candidate is a Democrat? Somewhere out there in the political matrix, there's a black woman who's a Republican, and the Stroll to the Polls Brigade calls her a sellout. They haven't cleaned that mirror in some time, I see. Does Latasha Brown care about Harris's pick for vice president? Or is it irrelevant? Tim Walz has been picked as vice president, who is just as far left, or even more. So black voters who have rallied behind Harris have to be held accountable for the incoming onslaught of ultra-liberal policies. Let's review some of his progressive policies as governor, where Tim Walz stands on the issues. Quote, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, the newly announced running mate to Vice President Kamala Harris. Wait, you see, that even sounds backwards. Running mate to Vice President Harris. So essentially there are two running mates. That's Democrats for you, my friends. Anywho, he has worked with his state's Democratic-controlled legislature to enact an ambitious agenda of liberal policies. Free college tuition for low-income students, free meals for school children, legal recreational marijuana, and protections for transgender people. Now, despite his views and policies as a whole, just these few policies would destroy the country. It's in fact big government, because the government would have to create more programs, spend more, and oversee most of what he is proposing. It's the same problem Bernie Sanders faced. Socialism, in a nutshell, is the epitome of DEI, equal outcome for everyone. It doesn't work in the real world. Proposing free college tuition for low-income students. Some may argue college is a scam. It's the #1 reason young people are in financial debt. Simply put, you have a choice. It's one of those issues that sounds rational in a utopian, but reality changes that thought process fairly quick. College is a business. Many must understand that. Sure, it's a risk, but responsible young adults make sure they can pay on their tuition as they attend college. And another aspect of this, well, it's generational wealth. Wealthy families saves up for their children to go to college. Those children don't face the same amount of debt, if any at all. You have to plan for college, not just jump into the fire. That's why family is so important, but that's for another episode. Legal recreational marijuana. Now, if we combine this with free college tuition, what's the point of having free college when everyone will just drop out after a year or two, or even after a few semesters? Yes, marijuana is one of the leading causes of high school dropouts and also college dropouts. It alters normal brain function, areas responsible for memory, learning, attention, decision-making, coordination, emotions, reaction time. It causes impaired thinking, memory loss, and the inability to comprehend due to the negative impact it has on brain function. And since it is a scientific fact that the brain does not fully develop until around 25, most college students are at severe risk of suffering from developmental effects of smoking marijuana. We see it today. Mental health issues usually are prevalent, such as anxiety, depression, and even psychosis. Long-term use can result in severe changes to brain structure and function, potentially leading to lack of critical thinking, short and long-term memory loss, and also a lowered IQ. Something many may not know is the brain exerts large amounts of oxygen while under the influence of marijuana. The chemicals in marijuana, THC, enter the brain. Then that effect upon the brain causes loss of oxygen. When the brain loses oxygen, it sends signals to the rest of the body. And guess what? The rest of the body loses oxygen, which creates the lethargic state while high. You become a couch potato due to loss of oxygen to the brain, loss of energy in the mind, and the body shuts down and wants to rest. So although you experience a euphoric feeling while high, your brain is actually under a chemical attack. Seth Rogen, Snoop Dogg, Wiz Khalifa, and other celebrities make smoking marijuana look cool, but they don't have to work to survive like the majority of the country. Look at all the movies about marijuana. What was the common theme in all of them? Boneheaded decisions related to getting high, where they lost their job and ended up in tons of trouble, which obviously were depicted as adventures for entertainment value. But in the real world, losing your job because you were high and forgot that you were scheduled to work that day has real-life consequences. And the point couldn't have been more clearer than in the film Friday with Ice Cube and Chris Tucker. The first wacky element is Craig got fired on his day off from work, but that wasn't the reason. The reason Craig got fired from his job on the day off is because Craig decided to steal boxes from his job. This is what marijuana does to the brain. The imagination is enhanced. You become more adventurous in how you perceive reality, and you make decisions that you think are rational. Now, many would say Craig didn't smoke marijuana. Well, let's just say he stopped smoking up until that point. But in the real world, you end up regretting those decisions because they were just plain stupid. And then, to add insult to injury, Smokey doesn't truly help in the situation. He encourages Craig to smoke more marijuana, because now Craig is depressed due to losing his job. Instead of Craig rejecting that offer and focusing on seeking employment, or even going back up to the job to apologize, he decides to smoke with Smokey, only compounding his problems. Mind you, he had to contribute to the household. The message in the movie was decent overall, but it was the lack of responsibility from Craig, as he was an adult who didn't truly show any accountability for his own actions. You don't lose your job and go on some magical psychedelic road trip across the world. Hollywood is a fantasy land, but it also has a negative impact on society's perception of reality. You see actors and actresses smoking marijuana, laughing, having a good time. That's what you want. The same with musicians. So you end up with a bunch of liberal zombies attending free college for only a matter of time. Then they will transform that college into some sort of performance arts facility, because the effects to the brain will affect their ability to think, learn, and remember, so test scores would be atrocious. Hence, let's just turn all the colleges to liberal arts programs, which caters to the, quote, imaginative side of the zombies due to the enhanced creativity marijuana provides. That's why most musicians, and even Hollywood, use drugs. It helps with their creativity. But this is what you get with far-left radicals, destroying the society, while their family and friends don't live those lifestyles. So why would any rational thinking citizen vote for a far-left presidential candidate and a far-left vice presidential candidate? And the sneaky thing about vice presidents is they don't have to debate for that job. They are chosen by the presidential nominee. So this means a vice president does not have to be truly vetted by their peers in a political party by participating in primaries such as a presidential nominee. Many think the vice president is essentially useless. I beg to differ. Look at the current vice president in Harris and her role in conspiring against Old Joe. Look at Old Joe when he was vice president, the shadow operations he was involved with. Vice presidents are more important, and in this case, more dangerous than you think. And Harris has just said to the citizens of the United States, free college for everyone, abortions for everyone, illegal immigrants can vote, men can physically assault women in the Olympics, drag queens can teach elementary kids about sex, claims to support women's rights, yet simultaneously violating those rights by allowing men to intrude in their feminine spaces, including young girls. Hey, let's just raise the national minimum wage to about $20 an hour. Who cares what businesses think? Wacky AOC proposed a 70% tax rate for the wealthy. Sure, why not? Harris agreed. Yeah, let's just do it. Who cares about the wealthy, which they are a part of that group? And let's legalize recreational use of marijuana so everyone can smoke till their brains explode. Why not, right? You only live once. Why not go out with a bang?
Harris attempts to appeal to the Gen Z base, but honestly, they don't realize how far left she is actually. All of this may be popular to the youth, and the older progressives and liberals fight for it, but they don't have to deal with the consequences of those policies. See, they want to destroy your future, your success, leave you in a state of misery, all the more reason to look to them for help. That's an abusive relationship, my friends. But what if they want to be in that abusive relationship? I ask this, if Black Votes Matter, old slickback Al Sharpton, and others in the black community demanded Grandpa Joe to do something for them, and he failed them all with the policies he proposed, what makes you think his vice president will introduce something different? She stood right by his side and didn't even think about the very people who helped put her in that position of power. The same with old Joe, completely ignored the black community. Again, it's the same play. Abortion protections, transgender protections, free college tuition. Oh yeah, that's the one, right? Oh yeah, that'll bring out the young generation of black voters. Yeah, they want free stuff more than anyone, right? That's what you think, right? If you're going to give free college tuition, why stop there? Just give everyone government-issued debit cards loaded with $10,000. Oh, then there's more. Just give everyone free apartments, even free homes. You know what? How about free cars, free electric cars to boot? Yeah, everyone can just go into a grocery store and load up baskets with food and walk out. Why not? How about allowing women to have an abortion after the child was born? Don't they have the right? It could possibly cause health problems for the woman after that birth, right? Since children can identify as the opposite sex, well, let's just let them have sex to determine if they want to be the sex they were biologically born as. Why not? You claim they can determine their own gender. Why can't they determine if they want to have sex? Oh, there's more. Any adult caught with pornographic material shall not be charged with a crime. Because after all, a child can identify as an adult. Any adult caught performing sexual acts with a child, all charges shall be dropped. Because the parents of that child identify them as consenting adults. Let's allow children to do drugs. Why not? Since they can identify as anything they want, and they have the right to do so, why can't they have the right to do drugs? Fine, let them do so. Homeless people should be able to walk into someone else's home and live there. Why not? Everyone is a human being under a new law, I don't know, called the Human Rights Compassion Act. A homeless man can just knock on someone's door, ask to stay there, and if the homeowner denies him, the homeless man can then sue that homeowner for discrimination. The civil courts will then award the homeless man with that home, and the previous homeowner will become homeless, and then do the same thing. Why not? When someone commits a crime, let them out under a new morals and ethics forgiveness program. Yeah, they apologize for murdering someone, you let them out, and give them a free electric car. A liberal paradise, right? How about giving away free gas? Everyone can just walk into a shopping mall and grab clothes for free, tennis shoes for free, cell phones for free, laptops, tablets, televisions, all types of electronics are just given away. Don't stop at legalizing marijuana. Let's legalize crack cocaine as well. Why not legalize heroin, acid, mushrooms, LSD, and even get this fentanyl? Yeah, let's just blow the country to smithereens. This sounds absurd and an exaggeration, but if you let one policy through the door, expect the other ones to follow. Oregon decriminalized hard drugs, such as cocaine and heroin. Guess who was the mayor of the most radical city in that state, being Portland? That's right, some wacky guy named Ted Wheeler. He was originally a registered Republican, but when he flipped to Democrat, well, drugs for everyone, I guess. Trying to appeal to the wacky liberals in his city, He folded to the mobs that destroyed the city. We all remember the viral videos of him being bullied by radical, spoiled rioters, right? Well, this is the result of pushing ultra-liberal policies. It destroys futures, destroys aspirations, and there is nothing left but anger, drugs, and violence, which leads to looting, shooting, and mob takeovers of your city. 1 minute you're virtue signaling for the liberals, to oppose your political opposition, screaming for protest in the streets. Then when they start to destroy your city, oh, now you think it was a bad idea to provoke it. Young people are misguided. Most of them are struggling with a lack of self-perception, lack of worth, lack of motivation, self-esteem. You don't pander to this demographic with fucking drugs. Because once things go left, your city becomes a savage land, and then you have the audacity to take it serious? Ask for the violence to stop. Recriminalize drugs. Because things got out of control? No, suffer the consequences of your liberal policies. And Harris is from San Francisco, which is a reflection of these same ultra-liberal views. Now they want to round up all the homeless people off the streets? Oh, is it because the presidential candidate is from San Francisco, and it shows how fucking insane local and state government are in her hometown? Oh yeah, now let's take it serious. We have a resident of our town running for president.
This is the chaos sector.